They pillaged coasts for gold, but in their kitchens they chased rot, blood, and beasts you'd never dare taste today. Welcome to the world, where meat was more than food, that was magic, medicine, and madness. Flames rise beneath the spit, licking the seared hide of an entire animal, limbs, stretched eyes gone dull in heat. Smoke coils through pine boughs as fat crackles, dripping into fire. A slow pan reveals blood pooling beneath a hide stretched tight across wooden poles, blackened, sour, steaming in the morning chill. A hand-gaunted silence slices into a coil of cured entrails, the knife scraping against bone. He licks the blade clean. Not waste ritual, not hunger, something else. Wolves circle at the edge of firelight, their growls swallowed by wind. In the air, marrow, ash, sweat, and something fermented, ancient, forgotten. The scent hits first burnt marrow, iron, and wood smoke. A warrior crouches by the fire, blade gleaming as he carves into a roasted haunch, juices spilling onto earth. He licks the steel clean. Behind him, others chant low over firelit meat. This isn't just a meal, it's initiation. Meat, here, is sacred theater. Survival turned spectacle. Flesh becoming myth. In the cold earth, meat ferments in linen bundles buried months ago. Entrails hang, cured in ash and time, turning sour in the breeze. Blood is boiled into thick, tar-black cakes chewed for strength or sacrifice. These aren't curiosities. They're keys to another world view where rot can purify, and eating blood binds you to gods. Hints from sagas, finds from frozen graves, and the brave souls who try to taste the past. This isn't food. It's memory, medicine, magic, each bite part of a story told in fire, in smoke, in blood. Warriors fed on beasts, not just to survive, but to transform, to prove, to become. The line between meat and meaning, thin as the blade that carves it. Tonight, we reveal the strangest ways Vikings transformed fleshsome, so bizarre they'll haunt your dreams. The settlement sleeps under a curtain of pre-dawn mist. From the fog, the sound of boots squelching on damp timber pierces the stillness. A figure emerges, Sigrun the huntress, cloak drenched in blood, breath steaming in the cold air. Slung over her shoulder, the severed head of a wild boar, massive and fresh, its tusks glinting wet in the dim light. Blood drips in thick ribbons, trailing onto the driftwood path beneath her. The snout still steams from the kill, nostrils flared in frozen rage. This is no butcher's errand. This is a ritual. In Norse lore, the head holds power of vision, sacrifice, and memory. Odin kept S head for its wisdom. Sigrun carries hers for something older still. Inside a crude timber kitchen, Harold the butcher waits bare-armed, eyes sunken with reverence. He lays the boar's head on a plank and raises a stone maul. With a single, brutal strike, the skull splits. A hiss escapes as brain matter spills onto hot coals, sizzling. He scoops deeper, extracting glistening marrow from the temple. It runs like molten gold, stirred with a paste of juniper berries, blackened by flame. The sweet resin smokes in the cold, curling into mist. For the Norse, marrow wasn't scrap, it was essence. A gift drawn from the beast's thoughts, roasted and shared. The air smells of sap, iron, and fire-washed bone. Ingrid, the cook, stands over the cauldron, chanting under her breath. She adds ash from last season's solstice fire and slivers of dried seaweed, binding land, death, and ocean in a single bite. Steam rolls from the bubbling marrow as she ladles it into ritual bowls. Olaf, the raider, accepts one with both hands. No hesitation, he drinks deep. The warmth hits like fire in his chest. He roars, louder than the wind, louder than the wolf's face, twisted in triumph. It isn't just hunger, it's a resurrection. The bowl falls empty to the planks, spinning once before it stills, cut to black. Echo of a savage gulp. A sous vide circulator hums quietly beside a pristine stainless steel counter. A Michelin star chef lowers a Wagyu ribeye into a water bath, then plates it with truffle foam and microherbs arranged like fallen leaves. Across the room, a foodie influencer giggles into a ring light. Fermented black garlic ice cream. Shut up, I'm dead. Stat overlay flashes. 65% of gourmands embrace sous vide. Only 5% would taste blood-cod entrails. There is no blood here. No bone. No sinew. This is meat made safe, curated, calculated, hard cut to a Viking cook slamming a haunch onto a moss-covered slab. Blood splattering into firelight. We've turned meat into performance. But once, it was transformation. Modern kitchens avoid the uncomfortable. Liver to bitter lungs. Illegal. Stomach best left to history. 82% of restaurants refuse to serve offal. But for Viking cooks, these were the most prized parts. The waste was sacred symbols of life, death, and courage. Anthropologist Duran Jonstatius. Icelandic folk recipe archive lists stews made with heart, lung, and bladder. Direct line from myth to meal. Modern chef turns away from a blood sausage. Back in time, entrails boil in seaweed-lined pits, steam rising like incense. What we discard, they worshipped. In the Viking world, the cook was more than a butcher. They were an intermediary. To prepare marrow or brain was not just to nourish the body, but to channel the beast, to commune with ancestors. Meals were layered performances of sacrifice, healing, and spiritual continuity. Blood wasn't just protein, it was prophecy. A modern chef stares at a lamb's heart, unsure what to do. Sigrun chants over simmering guts, each word old as bone. We see offal as a challenge, a voice in silence. For Vikings, it was a sacred rite. In today's world, we sanitize our meat, tweeze it, torch it, glaze it in foy foam. But the Vikings leaned into the primal, the pungent, the powerful. Where we chased trend, they chased transformation. To eat a heart was to gain courage. To drink blood was to remember the dead. We recoil from what they revered. But beneath the taboo lies a question. What did they know that we've forgotten? Vikings around a fire, mouths red with broth, eyes closed in communion. Modern diners sip amuse-bouches under sterile LED light. For the Vikings, eating meat was never just about filling bellies, it was about feeding identity. Each bite carried meaning. Roasted haunches honored the gods. Fermented, offal, preserved not only food, but memory. Blood was stirred with ash and chant. This was survival shaped into sacrament. When they cooked, they conjured. When they feasted, they remembered. Meals were rituals that bound clans, marked rites of passage, and carved a place for man between beast and spirit. We watch warriors pass marrow bowls in silence, firelight shimmering in their eyes, chiming in their eyes, each man holding something more than food. They weren't just feeding bodies, they were feeding myths. So what exactly did they eat? Charred brain pots unearthed from graves near Tish, shark meat buried and fermented until it reeked of ammonia, cheese curdled with blood and smoked in hide. Culinary reconstructions now bring these ancient horrors back to the table. Nordic food anthropologist Freya Holm walks us through her lab. Bubbling bone stews, marrow-seeped trenchers, and vat-fermented sea creatures that once sustained and, perhaps, altered Viking minds. Fermentation was chemistry disguised as folklore. It preserved nutrition but also transformed texture, taste, and, in some cases, the mind itself. This wasn't cuisine. It was edible storytelling. So, pull up a bench, Light fades. Smoke rises. The pot boils. What disgusts us, today congealed blood, rotting flesh, brain jellies, was once sacred. These foods were conduits between worlds. Each dish was a myth, boiled and served. You're not just going to learn what they ate. You're going to feel it, the heat, the hunger, the belief. Prepare for a feast of horror and wonder, where meat becomes myth and the strangest table awaits. Final shot. Broth simmering in a boar's skull. Steam curling around flickering torchlight, and fur-covered benches cast in shadow, waiting, fade to black. The feast begins. A charred Viking hearth exposed by the dig team, reveals more than soot. Fragments of bone, splintered and blackened, litter the ground like brittle leaves. Archaeologists brush away layers of compact ash and uncover a curved rack, stained deep with brine residue. Hung from it once were whole boar skulls left to steep in a harsh solution of seaweed-infused urine. Then slow roasted above pit ovens. Sites like Jasadla confirmed this process wasn't grotesque excess. It was technique. The brine softened cartilage, delayed decay, and infused meat with what Norse palates likely saw as sacred savor. It's a culinary paradox, flavor through controlled rot. Not wasteful, but ritualized efficiency. Each skull tells a story, not just of hunger met, but of power drawn from bone and brine. The camera lingers on a soot-marked tusk, its enamel chipped from centuries of silence. Imagine burying a whole shark, not to hide it, but to prepare it. Vikings did just that. Long before the modern Icelandic dish, Norse seafarers preserved Greenland shark by burying it in gravel pits. For weeks or months, the meat would rot, breaking down its natural toxins, namely trimethylamine oxide, into edible, if eye-wateringly pungent, flesh. Chemical analysis from exhumed remains shows spikes in ammonia and glycine, signatures of intentional fermentation. Not spoilage. This wasn't a mistake, it was chemistry without a lab. When winter stole fresh food, this foul delicacy became a lifeline. Cut to side-by-side visuals. A modern cube of on a toothpick. A bloated shark unearthed from ancient gravel. The soil still sour. What we now dare each other to eat for sport, they relied on for survival. Deep in Icelandic folklore, there are stories of travelers welcomed with black bread, not baked, but curdled. It was cheese skyer mixed with sheep's blood. Thick, dark, and metallic, coagulated into dense bricks, then fermented for days in cold cellars. This blood cheese offered an iron-rich shelf-stable meal with bacterial cultures that aided digestion and preservation. The process was risky. With the wrong balance of oxygen and contamination, Clostridium could turn a nourishing bite into a fatal one. But when done right, it was a gift, portable, potent, and symbolic. The camera moves in on sticky, dark curds sliced on a slate, board blood swirling into milk like ink in water. Modern palates may gag, but in a world of scarcity, this wasn't horror. It was ingenuity wrapped in ritual. Split a long bone open, and you reveal life's hidden storehouse. To the Vikings, marrow wasn't just a food, it was a winter miracle, roasted in bronze cauldrons, stirred into soups, or eaten straight from the bone. It was fat, warmth, and energy in one. Biochemical research shows marrow is rich in omega-3 south calories and fat-soluble vitamins, ideal for endurance in freezing conditions. But marrow wasn't only practical, it was symbolic. Oaths were sworn over bone soup, weddings sealed with marrow cups. Before battle, it was eaten to call the beast. Visuals show a warrior splitting a femur with a Sikh's blade. The creamy core slides onto a steaming bowl, passed with quiet reverence. They didn't just feed on marrow, they honored it. Among the most intimate artifacts found in Viking graves are drinking vessels made from bonafon femurs, hollowed and carved with runes. These marrow cups were used in oath rituals filled with broth, blood, or mead, and passed hand to hand during ceremonies of war and union. To drink from the bone of a beast or a slain kin was to inherit their strength. In some traditions, it was said a pact sealed in bone would bind even in death. Archaeologists at Birka and Jorvik have unearthed femur cups etched with spiraling runes, some blackened with residue. In torchlight, a warrior lifts a bone cup, eyes closed, lips to carved rimness, is not a toast, it's a covenant. Decay, to the Viking mind, wasn't defeated, was adaptation. Rot was preservation. Through trial and tradition, Norse cooks developed systems of controlled fermentation to keep meat edible for months without salt or refrigeration. Chemical overlays show how lactic acid bacteria colonized meat surfaces, lowering pH and suppressing spoilage. Certain rotting stages even produced natural antibiotics. Professor Marcus Reed calls their methods proto-scientific, a sensory chemistry built on smell, color, and instinct. In the lab, a time-lapse plays. Raw meat turns gray, green, then stable leathery, preserved. Next to it, a Viking vat is animated in cross-section. To our eyes, it looks like rot. To theirs, it was survival strategy, one that fed not just the body, but the whole clan. Vikings didn't just tolerate decay, they sanctified it. Myths tell of gods who die, rot, and return. Just as meat softens in the ground and becomes food, so too did warriors pass into death and back through ritual. Tales from and Edda speak of cauldrons that revive the dead, loaves that preserve power, and blood meals served at the end of the world. The symbolism is clear. Fermentation mirrored rebirth. Rot wasn't ruin, it was transformation. We see bubbling cheese wrapped in linen. A stew thick with offal darkens under moonlight. The camera pushes in on a slice of blood-curdled curd, sweating in silence. For them, every stench held story, every spoil held a chance at renewal. As we close this segment, we dive deep literally into the ground. A CGI breakdown reveals the Viking fermentation pit. Layers of straw, sand, meat, ash, and stone, stacked with precision. Each played a role. Straw absorbed moisture, ash sterilized, meat fermented, and sand insulated. Dr. Freya Lundquist explains. It was a biological machine, primitive, but precise. And at the bottom, after weeks of stillness, comes transformation. Food fit for gods and raiders alike. From slaughter to sacrament, from refuse to ritual, the pit gave life where there should have been loss. Fade out on the dark layers compacting, a slow heartbeat pulsing beneath the earth. The pre-dawn mist curls around a still lake as a figure emerges from the tree Sigron, the huntress. Her shoulders are broad, her breath visible in the cold. A fresh moose carcass drags behind her, antlers raking frost. Blood paints the path. She moves with ritual rhythm. Not haste, not pride, just purpose. At the longhouse, Harold the butcher waits beside the butcher's slab, sharpening a cleaver on stone. Ingrid the cook kindles a small flame beside an iron kettle already hissing. Sigrun drops the moose with a grunt. The body thuds against pine slats, its weight an offering. The steam rising from its wounds curls like incense. This is not a kill. This is a beginning. Harold raises the cleaver and drives it through flesh. The chest opens like a book muscle, tendon, sinew. His lips move with each cut, whispering butcher's runes older than memory. His hands are precise. Where others would see blood, he sees lines of force. Ingrid approaches with a flat stone plate. She selects a raw slice of liver deep red, glistening. She lifts it to her mouth, tastes, she nods. It's fresh, strong, worthy. In old lore, tasting the liver gave clarity, immunity, foresight. It was a test and a blessing. Organ trays fill with gleaming shapes, lungs, kidneys, intestines, brain. Steam rises from warm flesh as Harold wipes his blade and murmurs, "Good beast. You'll walk again?" Ingrid steps away from the butchery and kneels by the hearth. She prepares a cleanserpine sap warmed with vinegar and fire ash. She sips it slowly, smearing a line across her brow. Next, she sprinkles ash over the tray of kidneys. Her whisper is barely audible, a thank you to the spirit of the moose. Her hands move through steam, cleaning each organ with icy water, her touch both practical and ceremonial. The longhouse fills with quiet sounds, crackling sap, the hush of slicing, Harold's distant hum. But here, in the flicker of firelight, Ingrid consecrates the meal to come. Clean flesh, clean hands, clean soul. By noon, Sigrun and Ingrid are at the edge of the camp, beside a stone-lined pit. Salted shark and trout glisten in the pale sun. They pack the meat in layers, fish, turf, pressing each one tight, sealing air out. Overhead, gulls cry. Beneath, the earth waits to warm and rot. This isn't storage, it's transformation. Olaf arrives. He kneels and removes the stopper from his mead horn. It reeks salt, iron, sweetness. He pours it slowly into the pit. To Ran, he murmurs, "Sea wife, salt mother, feast." Well, the ground darkens as the liquid soaks in. What begins now is decay. What ends is survival. Olaf remains crouched, head bowed. His lips murmur to gods that hunger. Mead cut with goat's blood and sea salt drips onto stone, hissing as it meets warming rock. Steam rises, so does reverence. He doesn't know the names of the microbes, but he knows the smell of rightness, the sour-sweet beginning of life from death. Blood, salt, alcohol, a Viking trinity of fermentation and faith. The pit will not be opened for months, but this offering seals it. Olaf stands, tips the horn skyward, drains the last of the mead, and smears a line across his brow. The spirits have eaten, the rest is waiting. Harold now works in sunlight. He strings thin slices of moose flesh across a birch rack like musical strings. He smears each with bone, grease-thick and yellow rendered hours before. It shines in the sun. Grease keeps the flies off, adds weight, preserves energy, makes the dry meat last the winter. The wind twitches the meat. The sinews stretch, relax. Each strand shimmers with oil and slow decay. He adjusts a plank to catch the wind. The drying is as sacred as the cooking. Later, this jerky will feed warriors far from home. Today, it becomes a part of their survival. Inside the longhouse, Ingrid lowers a trough into the earth floor. She fills it with ale yeast and layers in cleaned intestines, kidneys, and fatty offcuts. The yeast froths, instantly bubbles, snapping like tiny fires. She presses it all flat, packs it with wool, and seals the top with a weighted board. In days, this will become a slab-dense, tangy, blood-rich, smelling of life, smelling of rot, smelling of survival. The scent already rises sour, meaty, metallic. This isn't waste, it's treasure. Every part of the beast serves the clan. Even the stink carries memory. By twilight, the longhouse glows. Firelight dances on the beams. The boar's head rests at the center, crowned with mushrooms, eyes glazed with tallow. Ingrid brushes the skull with marrow glaze each. Stroke glistens gold. Antler platters surround it, filled with root mash and dried berries. But no one touches the head. It is sacred, a symbol. The foresight of the boar. Its strength, now theirs. Mushrooms steam. The skull cracks faintly in the heat. No toasts, no clapping, only silent reverence. This meal isn't for hunger, it's for power. Each warrior receives a whalebone bowl, thick, dark, worn, smooth. Inside, soup of fermented marrow, thickened with dried gut and herbs. Steam spirals into the rafters. No one speaks. The silence is part of the rite. Words would break the transformation. Each sip is heavy, tangy, fatty, iron-sweet. A whisper of the beast still lingers. The marrow coats the throat, warms the chest, lingers behind the eyes. One by one they drink, and feel stronger. When the bowls are empty, Ingrid clears the blood-soaked boards and carries them to the hearth. She slides them into the flames, where fat pops and ash billows. She doesn't flinch. The fire consumes. The smoke remembers. She scrapes the ash into a clay jar. This will season the solstice broth, months from now. To the Vikings, ash wasn't waste. It was memory. Essence of feast. Shadow of spirit. She seals the jar and whispers, "Next time." Outside, under the pines, Sigrun kneels. She digs a shallow hole beneath a gnarled root and deposits the scraps, bone fragments, sinew, uneaten slivers. She smooths the earth, places a hand on the soil, and whispers, a hunter's prayer, soft, old, not guilt, gratitude. The wind rustles the boughs. Above, as she stands and looks to the sky, every piece of the beast was used. And now, even what remained returns. She walks back slowly, leaving no mark but memory. Inside, Olaf finishes the last of his marrow soup. He rises. His eyes shine with heat and trance. He moves to the fire, spreads his arms, and howls. It starts low. Then rises sharp, guttural, full of claim. The longhouse answers with silence. Outside, wolves pick up the sound. Tonight, Olaf takes the boar's strength. His howl seals the rite. In that voice, the marrow, the blood, the god-beast, waiting in his bones. The others lower their heads. Tomorrow brings war, but tonight, the feast still echoes. Warriors line up beneath torchlight at a temple of stone and timber, their torsos bare, muscles trembling in the cold. Each paints a cross of fresh boar's blood over their heart. A bone horn sounds once deep, hollow. The feast begins. Meat was more than fuel, it was identity, power, and communion with the wild. A ring of warriors passes a steaming bowl from hand to hand. Each one drinks from the same carved horn marrow, thick and hot, slides down their throats. They wince, grimace, then breathe deep. Sigrun marks each man's brow with soot and grease. This isn't hunger, it's metamorphosis. In Viking animist thought, the body of the beast held its Hamrit's form, its essence. Eating marrow was to take on its strength. Courage was consumed. Fear burned away. Their eyes gleam in firelight. Their voices are quiet. No warrior eats alone. The longhouse fills with the scent of roasted entrails and wet pine. No words are spoken as meat is passed hand to hand, each warrior tearing a bite, each mouth consuming the same beast. A successful hunt is not finished until the feast binds those who bled for it. In these moments, there is no chieftain, no raider, no cook, only the circle, only the spirit of the animal, now shared. Feasts marked marriages, oaths, and battle returns, not as reward, but as fusion. Through meat, they became a singular hunting soul. The clan, briefly, is one. The fermented shark stinks before it's seen. Carried on a carved plank, it sweats ammonia into the air, curling the noses of even hardened men. This isn't food for the body, it's trial for the soul. To eat thee is to face fear itself. Its sting floods the mouth, its bitterness attacks memory. But one who swallows and endures is changed. Rite of passage, punishment, proof. Yes, the laughter comes after. A warrior gags, then grins through tears. He has passed. He is stronger. At the central table, the choicest parts are laid aside. Heart, liver, kidney, brain. Only warriors eat these. The lean muscle goes to children and elders. But the organsy memory meat belongs to those who risk death. In Viking belief, awful held potency. The blood ran thicker, the taste sharper, the spirit closer. Eating it was to keep the beast's wisdom alive. A young raider reaches for a liver strip and is stopped. He has not yet earned it. In the shadow of a council fire, two clans meet. No weapons, no oaths, only food. The head of a prized boar crowned in herbs passes from one chieftain to another. No words are needed. The gift says enough. To give meat is to give self. A choice cut like marrow or heart is a sacred pledge. To refuse such a gift, a grave insult. Even skaldic verses recorded these feasts. He gave the blood pig's tongue, and the raid was sealed. The beast stands tethered, calm. Around it, hands press gently to fur. Lips whisper old chants. No axe yet. No blade. First comes gratitude, then promise, then kill. Drums beat slow. Smoke coils. The animal's eye blinks. To kill without right is to risk famine, madness, misfortune. But, with ritual, the soul is honored, and the flesh becomes blessing. Later, the bones are laid in rune shapes beside the ash pit symbols to guide the next hunt. Fermented liver, cheese with blood-curdled veins, gut paste spread on bark. These aren't just meals. They're myths you can bite. Disgust turns to awe when shaped by ritual. What repels becomes revered. Dr. Sigrid Helvorsen, cultural psychologist, explains. They engineered both chemistry and myth meat as sacrament and statement. The flavor isn't the point, the memory is. A warrior collapses into laughter after a rancid bite, then weeps. He's touched something older than speech. And so, we return to the table. To outsiders, the Viking diet seems madness, putrid shark, blood broth, organ cheese, but to them, it was power, faith, bond, story. The grotesque wasn't decoration, it was devotion. Each ritual bite told a myth, forged a bond, preserved a soul. Even in the taste of rot, there was reverence. Their strangest dishes were their greatest myths, each bite an act of belief. Survival demanded innovation, techniques, lost to time, now ripe for rediscovery. A torch descends into the dark. The walls are stone-lined, the floor packed earth. Hanging slabs sway slightly in the chill. Smoke curls from a nearby hearth, and frost crystals shimmer on meat bindings. We begin in silence. A root cellar, hewn from earth and stone, lies beneath a longhouse. Inside, raw meat dangles from pine struts, each piece wrapped in birch bark or linen. Temperature insight. These chambers maintained a steady to -4 degrees Celsius year-round. Cold enough to deter spoilage, yet dry enough to avoid mold. Design detail. Ventilation shafts carved into stone allowed airflow. Bark linings absorbed moisture. This was more than storage, it was insurance against starvation. It may seem unthinkable today, but aged urine was once a vital tool. Vikings collected stale urine rich in ammonia, soaking sinewy cuts for days. The result? Tender, chewable, jerky, nutritious, portable, and durable. Chemical note: ammonia breaks protein chains, softening meat fibers much like modern marinades. Used especially in winter months, this technique gave clans high-protein strips for journeys or sieges. Inside the longhouse, smoke curls constantly. But it's no accident. Fires are fed with pine needles and birch ash resins that generate tar-laced smoke. Preservation science. These smokes coat meat with phenols and acids that inhibit bacterial growth. The result, a crusted surface that turns meat nearly black. The flavor, bitter, complex, fiercely smoky. Cultural note, the smell of smoke meant safety. Spoilage smelled different. Viking cooks trained their noses. Above every hearth hung meat. Not for easy reach, but for slow aging. Weeks above warm smoke and dry rafters gave cuts a deep char crust, blackened, sealed, powerful in flavor. Sensory detail, the bark, formed by heat and smoke, locked in fat, resin flavored every bite. Symbolism, hanging meat over the fire, was an honor to the hearth goddess. It made the food central literally and spiritually. Outdoors, by streams or shaded glens, deep stone pits offered primitive refrigeration. Salted meat was wrapped in hide, placed between cold stones, and covered in straw or even snow. Preservation logic. Salt drew moisture, cold halted bacteria. Together, they preserved meat for months. Ritual note. These pits were often marked or blessed. To raid one without permission was a serious taboo. The casings of Viking sausages weren't cleaned sterile, they were cultivated. Each household kept its own membrane culture, passed mother to daughter, scientific echo. These house yeasts fermented the meat inside, just like modern sourdough starters. Consistency over generations. A family's taste was shaped by its microbial signature. Some links were tangy, others sour, even sweet. Professor Lars Nystrom, food microbiologist, explains it plainly. The Vikings didn't know microbes, but they knew what microbes did. Salt cured, cold slowed, smoke sealed, gut bacteria fermented. They watched, listened, tasted and built a sensory science before the word even existed. Modern parallels: salami, kimchi, dry-aged before, based on similar bacterial mechanics. Visuals, CGI animation of lactobacillus spreading across meat, proteins breaking down, acids forming protective barriers. We end with a journey no eye could see and, till now, a CGI sequence zooms in, meat cells stretch, collapse. Salt floods, gaps, smoke particles land. Bacteria bloom, then stabilize, acid levels rise, color darkens. The meat transforms. This was survival through chemistry unwritten, untaught but deeply understood. Through generations of smell, taste, and texture, the Vikings mastered a science modern chefs still chase. And in rediscovering these lost arts, we find not just food but memory. The flesh didn't just feed them, taught them. And it still can. In a modern craft kitchen, bone marrow toasts sizzle under a salamander broiler. Chefs delicately trimmed kidneys, tongue, and liver offal that was once discarded, now transformed into haute cuisine. This is the nose-to-tail movement, a culinary renaissance that values the entire animal. Echoing ancient Viking sensibilities. Where we see innovation, they saw necessity. Every organ, sinew, and scrap had purpose fuel, offering memory. Waste dishonors the beast, reads an old Norse proverb. Bone marrow gleams on grilled toast. A butcher's hands slice kidney with reverence. Guests clink horns over a platter of charred heart. Modern food culture prizes efficiency and ethics, but the Vikings lived it. They honored every part of the animal, not out of trend but truth. From rakefisk to gravlax, Scandinavian fermented fish dishes trace a salty lineage back to Viking shark pits. Modern diners celebrate these as delicacies layered, funky, alive with microbial complexity. Gravlax, cured salmon under salt and dill, follows the same microbial choreography Vikings mastered in gravel and turf. A chef presses dill into cured salmon. Animations layer ancient shark fermentation over modern curing vats. The Vikings weren't guessing, says fermentation scholar Dr. Linnea Grendel. They knew time and salt would do their magic. What once stank of survival now graces white linen tables. But the microbes haven't changed. Only our names for them. At Viking reenactments and Norse festivals across Scandinavia and beyond, the past is served hot: blood sausage, marrow stew, fermented goat cheese. But these gatherings aren't just meals, they're rituals reborn. Communal feasting wasn't entertainment. It was glue. It built trust, unity, memory. Horns raise in frothy toast. Children clamor for marrow-coated bread. A chieftain leads a chant as fire crackles beneath spitted meat. In Viking times, a feast was a circle of power, each bowl a bond, each bite a promise. Today, the same laughter and grease-smeared joy flow through shared tables. The flavors may challenge, but the fellowship never falters. A food vlogger winces theatrically as she eats fermented herring. Another dares himself to swallow blue cheese alive with veins. In our age, revulsion has become ritual. Disgust, once a barrier, is now part of the performance. We prove our adventurousness by conquering our palate. The reek of ammonia-heavy shark meat was a rite. Only the brave endured it. Just like today, it wasn't just about the food, it was about identity. A modern diner tears up at the stench but swallows anyway, grinning. Palate is the new edge of culture. We say we're pushing culinary boundaries, but the Vikings pushed first with guts and rot and courage on their tongues. Every time we recreate a Viking dish, we taste more than flavor, we taste memory. Offal cooked in ash, blood stirred into curd. These aren't just recipes, they're maps of survival. Chef Magnus Johansson stands over a smoking iron pot. This marrow broth, he says, isn't just food, it's a story. 1,000 years in a bowl. To eat what they ate is to feel what they felt: hunger, invention, reverence. Cured meat is sliced thin. A rune-etched blade wipes clean after carving a blood sausage coil. Modern gastronomy looks forward, but Viking food looks backward and inward. Each taste carries a whisper from another time. Viking kitchens were laboratories, not sterile. Separate salt, smoke, time, and temperature were variables. Results: edible miracles or fatal mistakes. pH, moisture activity, anaerobic control. These weren't concepts, but instincts. They were chemists without lab coats, says microbial food scientist Kerry Peterson. A Viking fermentation pit dissolves into a modern meat lab. Same colors, same chemistry, different tools. What we now map with machines, they mapped with memory and myth. Their table was a test site for survival and soul. Ash-cured meats, boar roasted in its own hide. Blood-fat sausages sliced with bone blades. Today's avant-garde chefs serve these dishes on stoneware with Latin names. But their source is saga, not science. High-end restaurants light candles, play ambient drones, and serve marrow in ceremonial silence. It's not imitation, it's reincarnation. The Viking table blurred performance and nourishment. Today's fine dining does the same. Modern plating, black garlic foam and boar cheekies juxtaposed with Viking feasting circles under flame. A shared meal is still a shared myth. Whether in a longhouse or a tasting room, food tells the story of who we are. A Viking woman carves meat in firelight. A modern chef wipes down a table, alone after a busy service. Both fed their people. Both honored the flesh. Viking recipes weren't just nourishment, they were negotiation. With nature, with gods, with time, Their strangest recipes challenge our palates and remind us that survival and celebration often taste the same. Bone marrow toast on linen napkin, a bubbling fermentation vat, a Viking carving roast under torchlight. We dine differently, but hunger, ritual, and meaning remain. Their table lives in memory, in flavor, and in the brave bite that dares to remember. Dawn breaks over the smoldering pit. Bones lie scattered in the ash, their marrow long devoured. A single bowl remains, its rim glistening with grease, left like a relic of hunger and ritual. Mist drifts low across the earth as Ingrid the cook kneels beside the hearth. With slow care, she shuts the stone hatch, the iron squealing softly. Her hands, streaked with soot and fat, leave dark marks on her weathered cloak. For a moment, she sits in silence, listening to the soft crackle of cooling embers. They ate marrow to seize the beast's strength, fermented flesh to outlast the dark winter. Their tables were places of power, community, and courage. Smoke curls up and dissolves into morning mist. A crow calls in the distance. Ingrid touches the hearth once more before rising and walking into the fading night. Cut to a modern butcher in a small shop. He switches off the smokehouse lights. Pine smoke hangs in the air. He breathes it in with reverence, a scent as old as fire itself. He gently places a final slab of cured meat on a wooden rack. No audience, no ritual, just practice carried forward. He wipes his hands, but does not speak. Vikings remind us that every meal carries meaning. In their strangest feasts lie stories of survival, belief, and unbreakable bonds. Outside, the mist thickens. A single spoon rests half-buried on a stone-bone white antler, glinting softly in the dawn light. It is both artifact and invitation. What bold flavors will you dare to taste, and what traditions will you carry forward? The spoon lies still, a bridge between the hearth and history, whispering across time in silence.